Okay, as you guys are making your way back in, I'm just going to announce our next speaker, Noe Torres. Are you guys familiar with Noe? Yes, that's awesome. Okay, so he is also a Texas author. He's going to talk about another UFO crash similar to Aurora, but 58 years later. Torres' book, The Other Roswell, UFO Crash on the Texas-Mexico border, first disclosed the amazing story of Air Force reservist Colonel Robert Willingham's encounter with a crashed UFO near Del Rio in 1955. Noe is a native of South Texas. He's maintained lifelong interest in UFOs that was inspired in part by an encounter his mother had in the 40s. I know a lot of you guys have had time to go around and talk with the other speakers. If you guys have questions for Noe afterwards, I know he'd love to answer that for you. He has written several books about famous UFO cases. He's appeared on the History Channel's UFO Hunters, the Travel Channel's Mysteries at the National Parks, and has spoken at and also helped organize numerous UFO conferences. I can tell you personally, we would be sunk without Noe's expertise and his help in so many things conference related, from running the sound and the PowerPoints to keeping things on track and helping us that way. So we certainly appreciate that from him. He has also appeared multiple times on Coast to Coast AM with George Noory, then the Jeff Rentz program, and many other media outlets. If you guys please would give a warm welcome to Noe Torres.
Thank you very much. I jumped at the chance to be here this weekend because the Aurora UFO case is one of my favorite cases. And when I was working on the book that Steve, my good friend Steven Androsco just talked about, it was my favorite chapter in the book to do, the Aurora case, and I also did several chapters on the airship mysteries that were going on, which Tui spoke about, and we'll probably hear a little bit more from my good friend Nick, who is up next after me. But you know, like I say, I just love the Aurora story. And just being able to be here this weekend and at this event is just a tremendous thing for me. Now, what I'm going to talk about today is a fascinating story. It's probably the book, and I've been involved in writing 12 books about UFOs, but this is probably the one book that I've written that I've gotten the most comments about. We've been on Coast to Coast AM several times. We've done a number of TV shows and radio shows, and the reason that this particular book, I think, and I probably should avoid walking around too much because of the buzzing that happens every time the aliens see you walk around, they press a button. But every time that we talk about this show, about this book on any one of these national shows, the switchboard lights up. And one of the reasons I think that this has been so impressive to people is because until just a few months ago, Colonel Robert Burton Willingham was actually the primary witness in this case, was actually alive and with us and had vivid recollection of the day that he saw this UFO, that he was told by a squadron commander to follow it in his F-86, that he followed the vapor trail down toward the Texas-Mexico border and saw the craft start to slowly descend, and then saw it make a crash landing near Langtree, Texas, on that day, that spring day in 1955. So to have a living witness during, as I said, unfortunately, Colonel Willingham passed away just last August. That one, and we even had him on with us on a couple of radio shows, and that was very impressive. Back in 2008, I was driving to Archer City, Texas. How many of you know where Archer City is? That's where the colonel lived for most of his life, up near Wichita Falls, just south of Wichita Falls. So I drove past here from Dallas-Fort Worth on up to Wichita Falls to Archer City, and I visited the colonel for the very first time. This was 2008, and he told me this amazing story he had tried to tell it in the past, and there had been some small little snippets of information from the colonel of him trying to tell the story. But on that day, when I was sitting in his living room in Archer City, Texas, when he told me this story for the first time in its entirety, I said, wow, this is amazing. And he made it clear to me on that day that he would not accept a single penny. Those are his words. Not a single penny from the writing of your book, if you decide to write one, because I told him we were interested in making his story into a book. And he wanted it to be clear that he was doing this just because he wanted to share this story with other people. So he was an amazing individual, retired Colonel Robert Burton Willingham. So as I mentioned, this incident happened in 1955. I'm just going to tell you just briefly a little bit about Colonel Willingham. He was, at the time of the incident, he was in the Air Force Reserve. He had previously served in the U.S. Army and in the Air Force, had served in the Korean conflict, and before that he had been involved in the reconstruction of Germany with the Army. He was born in 1926 in Holliday, Texas, and he served in World War II, as I mentioned. It so happens he served with the 82nd Airborne and was part of the 288th Combat Engineers. Now what's really interesting is, as you all know, all UFO stories are, you bring them out and they're immediately controversial. There's the naysayers, the critics, who immediately jump in and try to discredit. And of course it was no different with Colonel Willingham. He was subjected to a lot of ridicule, a lot of naysayers. Once our book was published, people who came forward and said that he was faking his military credentials, that he never served in the Air Force or the Reserve, that he wasn't really a pilot. And I'm going to show you, because we have the good fortune of inheriting all of his documents from the family and all of the photographs from his personal collection after his death. And I'm going to show you some documents that show the pilot training he underwent and the thousands of hours of flying that he did in military aircraft. It's all documented, and but unfortunately, as I say, anytime you bring forward a UFO story that seems credible and there's a living eyewitness, then people are going to jump on you. He served under General Patton. He participated in the reconstruction of Berlin, and he was involved in the Korean War. He began his flying career flying P-51 Mustangs, and then he was wounded in December 1950, which he ended up, after being wounded, he ended up mainly flying missions for the Air Force Reserve, and mainly he was involved in Cold War scenarios where fighter jets, which he would pilot, would accompany bombers making strategic runs, in this case, as I'm going to show you, from Carswell Air Force Base here in Fort Worth, heading toward El Paso, and then up along the west coast of the United States toward Canada. They were simulating what a nuclear bombing run would be like if the U.S. had to respond with nukes to a Russian attack. So you had bombers that would take off, they would refuel at various points along the way, they would pick up various escorts, fighter-bomber escorts, and so he was involved in those sorts of exercises during this period of time when the UFO incident occurred. So as you see on this map, I don't know if I have a laser pointer on this one, yes I do, okay. He was assigned that day to escort a B-47 bomber from Carswell Air Force Base, where his squadron picked it up, and he and 3 other fighter jets, they were assigned to fly to El Paso, where they were going to be picked up. You know, at that point, the B-47 was going to be picked up by another squadron, and they were going to proceed on up north. Well, he was, you know, part of the way down, going down in his flight path, when Colonel Willingham said there was suddenly this amazing amount of radio traffic on the military channel that they were monitoring. And he was, let me just show you. He was flying, there were 4 fighter jets, F-86s. He was in the what they call the lead position. This was Willingham's jet. This was the B-47. And there was this amazing amount of radio chatter on the military channel all of a sudden about an inbound bogey that had been spotted in the northwestern portion of the United States around Washington State, was moving very, very fast at speeds of over 2,000 miles and headed down toward their position. So it had been spotted along the way, and they had been advised that this was inbound toward them, toward that general area. Now, what Colonel Willingham said happened, and let me go back to this map, is there was a point at which everybody in this formation, all of these men who were later debriefed by the military and told that what they saw, they didn't really see, and they were not supposed to tell anybody about it, ever. What they actually did see, though, he swore until the day he passed away, is this object came into view and it passed right in front of the entire formation, and all these men saw it. The pilots in these fighter jets and the crew, they were all talking about what they saw, and they all of them sat in later at briefings where they were told that they didn't really experience this at all. And what it was a bright object, bright as a star, the colonel told me that day when I was in his living room in Archer City, hearing the story for the first time. Bright as a star that was very close, up close. So he described it as a hugely bright, intense light, so bright he could hardly stand to look at it, and the speed at which it was traveling and darting around in the sky, the maneuvers that it was making were just incredible. He was once again in his F-86, and he was given authority by his squadron commander to give chase to find out what this thing was that had just crossed in front of them and was heading south toward the Texas-Mexico border. So Colonel Willingham said that as he maneuvered his jet to head on south in the wake of this object that had just crossed the line in front of him, as he saw that, he noticed that the object began descending, and he feels that there was some sparks emanating from it, and maybe it tilted slightly as it descended quickly toward the Texas border. And then the object crash landed, he told us, and we showed him satellite maps, and we got him to pinpoint the location of where all this incident. We've been out there, and just recently we went out there with a drone, camera drone, and I'm going to show you some video here in a moment, very impressive of the actual location. This right here, for those of you that have been out to the Judge Roy Bean Visitor Center in Langtree, Texas, it's right around, these buildings right around here. And then there's a little circle drive, it's a dirt road that you can take that takes you right down close to the Rio Grande River. And you'll be able to tell better how everything is related to everything else in a moment when I show you the video. And the impact site happened just on the other side of the Rio Grande. There's a ridge here, and then up there's a cliff where the cliff falls down to the riverbank, and then there's this little interesting wash. Just keep this little white marking in the canyon, this wash, white marking area. Keep that in mind as you look at the drone footage here in a little bit. So what Colonel Willingham what he did was, he was in his F-86 when he saw this happen. He saw the object crash land. He had, of course, been hearing all the stories about UFO incidents throughout the United States. The mid-50s, that was a hotbed of UFO activity. We had had major waves of sightings all over the country, Washington, D.C., everywhere. So he wanted to know what it was that he had just witnessed. He wanted to go to the site and see for himself. So what he did was he got permission from his commander to return his F-86 to Carswell, and he went back down to the Del Rio area in trainer prop plane called an Aeronica. And he told us that he set that thing down right next to the object that had crashed right in here. By the time he arrived back, and it took him several hours to head back down there and to arrive, by the time he arrived there, the whole area was teeming with military men. As far as he could tell, the large part of the men were wearing Mexican Army uniforms. But there were other men on the scene who were wearing civilian clothing, and some of them did not appear to be Mexican, you know, of Mexican ancestry. Some of them could have been Americans, he said. Later, when we were interviewing him, we spent hours talking to him prior to publishing the book. He admitted to us that some of them could possibly have been CIA or U.S. military intelligence operatives. So the whole area was cordoned off. By the time he landed his small plane, and he had a friend of his who went with him as a second party in the Aeronica, and they both landed the plane and got out. This is hand-drawn by the colonel himself, showing what he experienced there. I added a little bit. I added the arrows, and I added the computerized representation of vehicles and so forth, but he did the most of the sketch work for this. Here's the Rio Grande River. There's the cliff here that goes up to the area where this happened, and he said he saw a skid path leading to a major concentration of the wreckage, and then at the lead end of that concentrated wreckage was what we would call the cockpit, or the passenger compartment. The area where he saw the beings was up here. There were Mexican soldiers guarding the perimeter of the crash area. At first, his impression was that they were all Mexican soldiers, but later, as he considered what he saw there, it was clear that some of them weren't. There were a lot of vehicles parked here in this area. There's kind of a dirt road here. And in the pictures that you'll see that dry creek or wash coming down like right around here. And this is where Colonel Willingham brought his Aeronica, his small plane, down, and his friend, an electrical engineer, was with him. So let me just show you this video that we shot from a drone recently, so you can get an idea of what's out there. So this drone is taking off from Langtree, Texas, near the Judge Roy Bean Visitor Center. And just to give you a perspective here, the Rio Grande River is down here, and this is Mexico on the other side. So this is what I mean, this sheer drop off, these cliffs, and then up above is you know where this incident occurred. The drone is going to turn toward the area where Colonel Willingham said that he saw all of this happen. Okay, so here, the drone is moving closer to, this is the wash that Colonel Willingham described and what he identified for us in satellite pictures that we showed him. And this right here is where all the activity was, right in here. So once again, the Rio Grande River is down in here. There's a sheer drop off right here. And everything happened, the area was cordoned off, and there were vehicles parked all along here. And we're going to swing back and take a look at where Langtree is relative to that. Okay, now we're going to revisit the same site. here in just a moment. It's this area here. Here's the wash that I was describing, and then there's a ridge here. And right in this area, Colonel Willingham parked his small plane somewhere around here, landed it. And we're going to have one more view from another angle here in a minute, and we're swinging the camera back toward the Judge Roy Bean Visitor Center back in there, and the loop that goes down by the river. If you all are ever in that area, it's really neat to go down there and sightsee. I used to go down there before I knew anything about this UFO incident because I love historic buildings and stuff. And here's another angle. This is where everything took place. This is the wash that Colonel Willingham described. Judge Roy Visitor Center is way down here, so we're looking a little bit off this way. And all of the activity that was going on was there. Okay, so Colonel Willingham was able to give us a real good fix on where it was that he saw this happen. And I'm going to just let you listen to a brief excerpt from a radio show that we did with him on the Jeff Rense program, and I'm hoping that this equipment will cooperate here.
All right, so you're standing there with your arms up in your flight suit next to this little private plane, and you're 150 yards away from this crash disk. How many soldiers were there approximately there, and were they deployed in a circle around it, or what?
No, it was about, I'd say 150 there when I got there.
All right, so quite a number.
Already.
Right? Mm-hmm.
And about 35 vehicles.
Wow, all right. Could you see
and
the
vehicles on both sides.
All right, could you see the craft itself?
Yeah. I went in there and I was talking to this Spanish lieutenant. Anyway, I talked to him, and we walked down through there, and he said, "I never seen anything like it before." And I said, "No, I haven't either." But I said, "This site's a little different than some I've looked at. This in here had some solid pieces still scattered down through there."
All right, so some of it was intact. Did it have any markings or anything on the exterior, or was it just the skin of it?
Well, no, I picked up a little piece of it on the way out of there.
Well, I know. I want to get there in just a minute. Hold on with that, please.
All right.
You walk up to this thing. Well, did the Mexicans let you get close to it, or did they hold you off a little bit?
No, they held me off till the lieutenant got up there.
All right, and when he got there...
I don't think they spoke very good English, the rest of them did.
All right. I hope they weren't putting their guns on you all this time.
Well, they haven't pointed that direction.
I get it. I get the picture. All right, so the lieutenant gets there. You walk up to the craft itself. How close did you get to it, Colonel?
I walked right up and kicked a piece of it.
Wow. All right. How big was it in diameter? About?
Well, where it hit, there was a lot of small pieces, like 2 foot by 8 inches, maybe 2 foot by 48 inches. Just different pieces off of it, you know.
Okay.
Then it got on up to where it stopped. It looked to me like that it was a piece of 10-inch pipe that was real shiny. And I don't know if that was part of the fuel consumption part of it or what it was. But he didn't know either, the Mexican did.
Okay, just wanted to give you a little bit of what Colonel Willingham, how he described the crash scene that day. And the other thing he talked about was he had just a moment during which he had a chance to look through a crack in the hull of the main part of the ship. And inside, he saw the bodies of these little beings, which he's going to describe next.
Was there any evidence of any life, dead or alive, around that object?
They were on up front, according to them. They said don't look like people, but said we can't let you go up there. The general's already said no, nobody look at that.
So
They didn't even let the boys that was guarding it look at it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so the front of the craft that impacted the ground ripped a hole open inside, and apparently people could see in there, and there were dead ETs, or they weren't humans, there were dead bodies in there of some kind.
Right.
And you couldn't get around there to see in there either.
Well, I kind of snuck around a little.
You're a sneaky fella, aren't you? All right, now tell me, you snuck around there a little bit, Colonel. What did you see?
Well, it didn't look like human beings to me.
How many of them were there?
I believe there were 3, and the lieutenant said there were 4.
All right.
I never did see the other one.
Were the bodies mangled, or were they relatively intact, and what were they dressed in?
Well, they weren't dressed at all,
Okay.
and they were in a lot of different pieces. I didn't see but one that had a complete top, but I wouldn't swear what he was either.
All right. What did the head look like? Anything like we've seen in the common research literature? The big eyes, the smooth skin, or the little mouth? Did you see anything?
Yeah, there's some of them that look like that. They just, I don't know how you explain it, but they just, their heads, arms and stuff, their arms are little bitty. They look like broomsticks.
Wow. Okay. But they had
big.
broomsticks.
Go ahead.
All right. No, I got you. They had.
All right, so he was quite, for the rest of his life, he was wondering what that was he had encountered. And I'm fast running out of time, but I just want to share with you one last thing, and then Nick Redfern will be on shortly. There was a piece of metal that he picked up. It was grooved, and it had holes in it as if to dissipate heat. He tried to take it into a military lab for analysis, and then the lab closed, and they claimed that he never had taken that piece of metal there, and that the person he handed it to had never worked there. And so then the military made it disappear. Colonel Willingham felt. But we found in his possessions after his death, in looking through all his important papers, we found a little piece of metal, which you can see in this video that I shot. We found it in a little coin purse, and it looked like this. You all are the first to see this, by the way. We haven't shown it to anybody. It was a smooth, brushed 2-inch piece of metal. And we thought it was really unusual because it was the only non-document, the only item that was not a piece of paper that was in his possession at the time of his death. Why would he keep this? Why would he have a special container for it? So we weighed it, and it weighed 11.6 grams, just under half an ounce. And we subjected it to a number of tests, the specific density. Yeah, we discovered that it was non-magnetic. And we, of course, tested it for radioactivity. Radioactivity seems to be a common thread that runs through UFO encounter stories. And we subjected it to radioactive testing with the Radex Geiger counter, and we discovered that there was no radioactivity. It was inactive, inert. But the telling test was the X-ray diffractometer analysis that was done at our local university. And here the specimen was placed, and there were laser beams that were shot onto its surface, and they traced out the surface, and the computer interpreted the and drew kind of a computer diagram of the various features of the surface of this metal. And what was really, really interesting is what this turned out to be is a kind of a rare form of graphite. And what's interesting about graphite, graphite is a form of carbon, which astronomers and scientists tell us is probably the most common or one of the most abundant elements in the entire universe. And what's really, really interesting is how graphite is used on our planet in many military and aerospace applications. It has been used for surface tiles on space shuttles, nuclear technology as a neutron moderator, under extreme cold conditions as a cryogenic, in cryogenic applications. The properties of graphite make it perfect for spacecraft components. It can withstand extreme temperatures. It's resistant to abrasion, high density, self-lubricating, stable in many ways. So graphite is being looked at for constructing various structures in the future by NASA for when astronauts go to other worlds. So another thing is that graphite has been used in the construction of stealth aircraft such as the stealth bomber. So the interesting thing is that yes, graphite is an element that we find here on Earth. It is not anything particularly obscure, but then again, it's an element that doesn't necessarily originate here on Earth, and it is an interesting material that has many military and aerospace applications. So we're still doing more research on this, but it's interesting that that was a one object that we found in Colonel Willingham's documents after his death. Well, we'd like to thank you all for coming to this wonderful event, and you all have been a great audience. Thank you very much. Don't go away because my friend Nick Redfern, thank you. My friend Nick Redfern, whom I first met many years ago at the Roswell UFO Festival, has got a great presentation on some of the major UFO cases that have taken place throughout history in the state of Texas. So he'll be here at 3:15. Thank you.